The rain came sideways that night. It swept across the ashfall barrens in long grey sheets, turning the cracked volcanic ground into a mess of dark puddles and loose ash. The smell was like old fire. It always smelled like old fire out here. Ryland Dusk had been sitting inside his survey post for 4 hours, watching the storm data scroll across his screen when the heat sensor chimed. A small red dot blinked on the map. Sector 7, the ravine near the eastern border marker, 60 meters deep, sheer walls on both sides. His survey notes said to avoid it. He looked at the dot for a long moment. Protocol said to log it, tag it unknown, and wait until morning. It was probably a geothermal vent cracking open. It happened out here. The ground was always doing something. He pulled on his waterproof coat anyway. The walk to the ravine took 12 minutes in the rain. His boots sank into soft ash with every step. His headlamp cut a weak yellow path through the dark. He could hear the wind pushing through the rock formations around him, low and hollow, like something breathing. He reached the ravine edge and looked down. At first he saw nothing, just the black walls dropping away into deeper black. Then his headlamp caught a shimmer, something copper-colored, wet, pressed between 2 large boulders at the bottom. It was shaking. He lay flat on the edge and looked harder. It was a dragon hatchling. Small, maybe the size of a large dog, though built heavier, with a wide flat head and a short thick neck. The scales caught his headlamp and threw the light back at him in flecks of orange and amber. One of her wings was spread at a wrong angle, pressed against the rock. The other was folded tight to her side. She was trembling. Ryland stayed still for a moment. He was on the edge of Ember Spire territory. He knew that. His supervisor Dressed had reminded him of it twice this week, in the polite but serious way that meant Dressed had already been told by someone higher up. The dragon clans of Dreven did not want humans near their nesting grounds. The colonial authority had a whole page of guidelines about it. Ryland had signed a form. He looked at the hatchling again. She was a child. She was cold and alone and trapped at the bottom of a ravine in the middle of a storm on an alien planet, and she was shaking. He found the climbing rope in his pack. The descent took longer than it should have. The walls were slick with water and loose volcanic rock. He went down slowly, testing each foothold, and twice the rope slipped and his heart jumped. When he finally reached the bottom, the ravine floor was flooded with a few centimeters of dark water. His boots went straight into it. He moved toward the hatchling carefully. She heard him and snapped. Her head came up fast, jaws open, teeth small but sharp, and she made a sound low in her chest that was not quite a growl and not quite a cry. Her eyes were large and gold and fixed entirely on him. Ryland stopped. He took one slow step back and crouched down so he was lower than her eye level. He did not look away, but he made himself go still. He kept his hands visible. He did not reach for anything. He talked to her. He did not say anything important. He just kept his voice low and even and present, the way he used to talk to hurt animals when he was a kid, back on a farm that felt very far away from here. He told her the rain would stop. He told her he was not going to hurt her. He told her he did not know how she ended up in this ravine, but that it looked like it had been a long night, and he understood that. She kept her eyes on him. She did not snap again. After a while, he could not say how long, she lowered her head a few centimeters. Her jaw closed. She was still shaking. Ryland reached slowly into his pack. He pulled out the thermal survey blanket, the silver foil kind designed to hold heat in cold environments. He unfolded it. She flinched at the sound, but did not move. He set it on the ground in front of him, then pushed it gently toward her with one hand, staying low, staying slow. She sniffed it. He waited. Then she put her snout against it, and after another long moment, she shifted her weight and pulled it closer to her body. She made a small sound, still not a growl, something quieter than that. Ryland sat down in the flooded ravine floor. He was cold. His coat was not doing much anymore. His data scanner was getting wet, and he was going to have to explain that to Dressed later. He had no plan for how he was going to get a dragon hatchling out of a 60-meter ravine in a storm. He stayed anyway. Sometime past the middle of the night, after the worst of the rain had thinned to a drizzle, the hatchling moved. She pressed forward along the ground, slow, low, still watching him, and then she put her snout against his knee. She was warm, even through his wet trousers. She stayed there, her eyes closed, her breathing slowed. Ryland put his back against the ravine wall, pulled his knees up slightly to keep her comfortable, and looked up at the narrow strip of dark sky above them. He kept watch. The drizzle did not stop, it just got quieter. Ryland sat still for a long time after the hatchling fell asleep. He did not want to move and disturb her. He did not want to make any sound that might bring that tension back into her small body. So he sat with his back against wet rock and his knees drawn up and a dragon sleeping against his leg, and he watched the narrow strip of sky above the ravine. No stars, too much cloud. He checked her wing carefully once she was deep enough in sleep that she did not flinch at small movements. He did it slowly, one hand barely touching. The membrane was torn in one place, maybe 15 centimeters along the inner fold. It was not bleeding badly. The tear looked clean, like she had caught it on the rock edge on the way down. He did not try to treat it. He did not have the right tools, and he did not know enough about dragon anatomy to risk doing more damage. What he could do was keep her warm. He had a second foil blanket in his pack. He unfolded it slowly, watching her face the whole time. She shifted at the sound, but did not wake. He draped it across her back and tucked the edge under her side. She made a low rumbling sound in her sleep and pressed slightly harder against his knee. He took that as good news. Around the second hour, his comm unit buzzed. He already knew who it was. He answered quietly, turning the volume down low. His supervisor's voice came through flat and even, the way it always did when Drest was managing his own frustration. The sensors at Regional Command had flagged an unknown heat signature in Sector 7. They had also flagged Ryland's own comm unit moving away from his post in the middle of a storm. Drest asked, in a very calm tone, what exactly was going on. Ryland told him. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Drest told him to leave, not loudly, not angrily. He explained in the same careful voice that finding a human in Ember Spire territory with a dragon hatchling was the kind of event that could take years to untangle diplomatically. The colonial authority had protocols. Those protocols existed for a reason. The dragon clans already did not trust human surveyors operating this close to their borders, and if Coldrath's clutch woke up to find one of their hatchlings in human hands, no explanation in the world would make that look like anything other than what it looked like. Ryland listened to all of it. He did not argue. He said understood. Then he said he would check in again before dawn. Then he ended the call. He did not leave. The hatchling slept on. Around the third hour, she woke up on her own, suddenly, the way young creatures do. Her head came up, and she looked around the ravine with wide gold eyes, and for a second he could see her remembering where she was and why, and that she was not where she was supposed to be. Her whole body went tight. Then she looked at him. He stayed still. He kept his voice low. He said, "Still here, it's okay." She watched him for a long moment. Then the tension went out of her, not all of it, but enough. She put her head back down. After that she was curious, more than scared. She sniffed his boot. She sniffed the survey scanner he had set on the ground next to him and batted it with one forepaw, then looked at him when it beeped, as if that was his fault. He turned it off. She investigated the empty ration pack sleeve he had left near the shelter corner. She picked it up in her teeth and shook it, then dropped it, unimpressed. She had eaten the whole ration pack 2 hours earlier. He had placed it near her while she slept, close enough to smell. She had woken up briefly, eaten it in 3 bites, and gone back to sleep. He made a note to include that in whatever report this eventually became. Near the 4th hour, she made a sound at him. He had heard her make sounds all night, the warning growl at the start, the low rumble in her sleep, small sharp noises when she moved wrong and her wing pulled. This sound was different. It was quieter. It came with her head tilted to one side and her eyes on his face, and it had the shape of a question, even if he could not have explained why he thought so. He did not know what she was asking. He answered anyway, in the same low, even voice he had been using all night. He told her the second sun would come up after the first one, that there were two of them on this planet, which still struck him as unnecessary but impressive. He told her that when the light came, the ravine walls would be easier to see and they could figure out the next part. She listened to him the way animals sometimes listen, not to the words, but to the steadiness of the sound. When he stopped talking, she made the sound again, short, quiet. He answered again. They went back and forth like that for a while, two creatures at the bottom of a ravine in the dark, neither understanding the other, both showing up for the conversation anyway. The sky above the ravine stayed black, the drizzle kept falling. Rylan kept his eyes open. He had gotten good at waiting. The first sun, Verath, came up without warning. One moment the sky above the ravine was black, then it was silver. The light dropped straight down into the ravine like something poured, cold and pale, turning the wet rock walls the color of old iron. The hatchling stirred. She lifted her head and looked up at the strip of sky, and her copper scales caught the light and threw it in small scattered sparks across the ravine floor. Rylan had not slept. His legs were stiff and his back hurt, and there was a patch of dried ash caked to the side of his coat that was going to be annoying to clean. He was cold in the specific way that meant the cold had stopped feeling like cold and started feeling like nothing, which he knew from experience was worse. He stretched his legs slowly, careful not to disturb the hatchling. She was already awake and watching the sky. Between Verath and the second sun, Dreen, there was always a gap, 40 minutes, give or take. The old survey notes called it the grey window. The light was not warm yet, it was just light. It was in the grey window that Rylan first heard the sound. He almost missed it. It was low, below the level of the wind, more like a pressure than a noise. A displacement of air. He looked up. On the ravine wall above them, something was landing. It landed without sound. That was the thing that struck him first. Something that big should have made a sound. It was a young dragon, lean and fast, scales the dark grey of volcanic stone. It folded its wings and crouched on the edge of the ravine and looked down at them, and it went completely still. The hatchling below made a sharp sound. The grey dragon's eyes snapped to her, then back to Rylan. Rylan did not move. He kept his hands where they could be seen, and he kept his breathing even. He did not reach for his comm unit. He did not stand up. He had a strong feeling that doing anything sudden right now would be a significant mistake. The grey dragon, he would later learn his name was Orin, watched him for a long stretch of silence. His expression, if it could be called that, was unreadable. He looked at the foil blanket over the hatchling's back. He looked at the torn wing. He looked at the ration pack sleeve on the ground. He looked at Rylan again. He said nothing. Then the air changed. Rylan had felt pressure before. His first year out on Dreven, a geothermal vent had cracked open 200 meters from his post, and the shockwave had knocked him sideways. This was not like that. This was slower, heavier. It was the kind of pressure that made your body want to make itself smaller without knowing why. Coldrath came over the ravine edge like a slow storm. He was enormous. His wingspan blocked the grey sky entirely for a moment as he descended, and when he landed on the ravine wall opposite Orin, the rock cracked under his feet and small pieces of it fell. His scales were deep red-brown, almost black in the poor light, and there were old pale scars across his chest and along his jaw that were wider than Rylan's hand. His eyes were amber, the same color as the hatchlings, and they found Rylan immediately. Rylan did not look away. He did not look directly into the eyes either. He fixed his gaze somewhere in between, at the chest, at the ground in front, not a challenge, not a retreat, and he stayed still. The hatchling was awake and alert now. She had pushed herself upright. She was looking up at the ravine walls and making sounds, rapid and high, urgent. She was too young, Rylan understood, to climb out on her own with a torn wing. She was trying to tell them something. Then a third dragon came down into the ravine itself. She descended fast and landed hard and crossed the distance to the hatchling in 2 steps. She was smaller than Coldrath, but not by much. and her scales were amber gold, darker than the hatchlings, and she moved the way people move when they have been afraid for a very long time and have finally found the thing they were afraid for. She checked the hatchling with her nose, her jaw, the flat of her neck pressing gently along the small body. She checked every inch. She checked the wing. She made sounds low and continuous, and the hatchling made sounds back, both of them talking at once. This was Vinna. Rylan understood what he was looking at. He had sat up all night in a ravine with someone else's child. Now the mother was here. He understood that his presence in this moment was a complicated thing, and that complicated things had a way of going badly when nobody made careful choices. He sat on the ravine floor, and he did not move. He put his hands flat on his knees. He looked at the ground. Vinna finished her inspection of the hatchling and went still. Then she raised her head and looked at Rylan. Her eyes were the same amber as her daughter's, and they were not calm. They were the eyes of something that had been searching through the night and had found what it was looking for in the last place it had expected. Above them, on the ravine walls, Coldrath had not moved. He was still watching. The second sun, Dreen, was just beginning to clear the Ember Spire Mountains in the distance. The grey window was almost over. The light coming down into the ravine was turning slowly from silver to gold. Rylan stayed where he was, hands flat, eyes down. He waited to find out what happened next. Orin spoke first. His voice was low and came with a physical weight to it, a subsonic rumble under the actual words. The words themselves were draconic, full of sounds that did not exist in any human language, and Rylan understood none of it. But the tone was clear enough. It was the tone of someone asking a very controlled question while working hard to stay controlled. Then Orin switched. His colonial common was rough. The words came out in the wrong order sometimes, and he paused long in the middle of sentences as if finding them by hand, but it was understandable. "Why did you stay?" Orin said. It was not framed as a question. It came out flat, like a fact waiting to be disproven. Rylan looked up. He looked at Orin on the ravine wall, not at Coldrath, because Coldrath was the kind of thing you did not look at directly until you were invited to. He thought about the question. He did not try to make his answer sound like more than it was. "She was cold," he said. "She was alone. She was hurt and she could not get out. I was not going to leave her like that." Orin was quiet. Then he relayed something upward in Draconic. Coldrath's response came without pause, long and slow, each syllable deliberate. Orin translated. "He asks what you wanted, what you planned to take." Rylan shook his head. "Nothing." Another relay, another response. "He does not believe you," Orin said. "He says all humans want something. He asks what claim you are making. On the hatchling, on this ground." "No claim," Rylan said. "She needed help. I helped. That is all." The silence that followed was the longest one yet. Coldrath descended from the ravine wall, not fully, just enough that his head was lower and his eyes were level with Rylan's position. Up close, the elder dragon was worse. Not frightening in the way that made you want to run. Frightening in the way that made you understand, on a level below thinking, that running would mean absolutely nothing. Coldrath looked at him for a long time. Rylan stayed still. He had said the truth. He did not have anything else to offer, and he was not going to make something up. Vinna spoke from behind Coldrath. Her voice was different from Orin's or Coldrath's. It had less rumble and more texture, like something worn rough by use. She spoke for a while. When she was done, Coldrath turned his head to her. They exchanged several short phrases. Then Vinna looked at Rylan directly. Her colonial common was better than Orin's. "She cried," Vinna said. "In the night, my daughter, she cried." Rylan said, "Yes." "And you stayed?" "Yes." Vinna looked at him the way people look at things that do not fit the shape of what they expected to see. She looked for a long time. Then she looked at Coldrath and said something short in Draconic. Coldrath made no visible response. Orin, very quietly, said something from above. Rylan caught only 2 words of it, because Orin said them in colonial common, maybe by accident, maybe not. Two words that did not need translating. She chose. The ravine went quiet. Koldrath pulled back. He did not retreat. He simply stopped pressing forward. He turned away from Rylan and looked at the hatchling, who was pressed against Vinna's side, but watching Rylan with those wide gold eyes the same way she had been watching him all night. Rylan understood, in a loose way, that something had just happened. He did not know the exact shape of it. He knew that dragons had customs he had never been taught and instincts that went deeper than any colonial agreement. He knew that a hatchling who pressed herself against you in the dark and slept there was doing something that meant something to her people, even if he had not known it at the time. He had not stayed because of what it might mean to them. He had stayed because she was a child and it was the right thing to do. He thought, not for the first time, that those two facts being true at the same time was the only kind of luck he had ever trusted. Koldrath turned back toward him. His expression had not changed. His eyes had. They were not warm. Rylan did not expect them to be warm, but they were different than they had been at the start of this. They had been looking for something in him, the hidden thing, the angle, the play, and they had not found it. That had not made Koldrath comfortable. Old creatures who have survived long enough to become old do not become comfortable with things that do not fit, but it had shifted something. The second sun was fully up now. The ravine was warm for the first time since Rylan had climbed down into it. The gold light reached all the way to the floor. Orin climbed down from the wall and stood a few meters off to the side. He looked at Rylan with an expression that was not quite respect and not quite curiosity, and somewhere between the two. He said nothing. The hatchling made the small questioning sound, the same one from the long night. Rylan, without thinking, answered it. Koldrath looked at him sharply, then at the hatchling, then back. Nobody moved. Rylan thought, whatever comes next, I said the truth and I did not leave her alone. Whatever they decide to do with that, I can live with it. He sat in the gold light at the bottom of the ravine and waited. The three dragons withdrew to the far end of the ravine. Koldrath, Vinna, and Orin stood close together and spoke in low draconic for a long time. Rylan could not hear most of it. What he could hear was that it was serious and that it went on longer than he expected, which he took to mean they were not in agreement about something. The hatchling stayed where she was. She was tucked against Vinna's side, but her eyes kept drifting back to Rylan across the ravine floor. He did not look directly at her. He did not want to create any impression of pulling at her attention. He sat with his back against the warm rock and his hands resting on his knees, and he waited, and he tried not to calculate odds because the odds were not the point. His comm unit buzzed. He looked at the screen. Dressed again, he answered with the volume low. Dressed's voice was different this time, controlled in a different way, the kind of control that meant someone had been on a call with their own superiors in the past few hours. Colonial authority had picked up multiple large heat signatures converging on Rylan's position. The system had flagged it automatically. A response unit had been dispatched. Armed, standard protocol for dragon proximity events. ETA, Dressed said, was under 2 hours. Rylan looked across the ravine at Koldrath. He said to Dressed, pull them back. Dressed explained, patiently, why that was not possible. He explained it in the language of liability and protocol and the chain of command that handled proximity events, and every word of it was technically accurate and entirely wrong for the situation. Rylan waited until he was done. Then he said, if that unit arrives here, they will see 3 dragons and a hatchling in a tight space with 1 human. They will make decisions based on that picture. Those decisions will be wrong. Whatever happens after that will not be fixable. Dressed said the unit was under orders, and he could not simply recall it on a surveyor's request. Rylan said, then I will file a full breach of trust report under Colonial Charter Section 14. I will include the full comms log from last night, including the part where I told you what the situation was and you understood it, and ordered me to leave an injured hatchling alone in a ravine anyway. I will name you in the report. and I will send it directly to the Colonial Ethics Board before that unit is in visual range of this position." There was a long pause. He had never threatened his supervisor before. He was not angry when he said it. He was calm the way he had been calm all night, the same steadiness, different use of it. Drast said he would look into alternatives. Ryland said, "I need it done in 20 minutes." He ended the call. Across the ravine, the conversation between the dragons had stopped. All three of them were looking at him. He did not know how much of that they had been able to hear or understood or read from his tone. He met Coldrath's eyes briefly and then looked at the ground again. 11 minutes later, Drast sent a text confirmation. Response unit redirected. Reason logged as surveyor field assessment. Situation resolved. Rylan let out a slow breath. The dragons finished their conversation. They separated and came back across the ravine floor. Orin stopped a few meters off. Vinna returned to the hatchling. Coldrath came forward. He stopped about 4 meters from Rylan and lowered his head. Not low, not a bow. A deliberate drop of the chin, controlled and precise, the way a very large thing can make itself slightly smaller and mean something by it. Orin said quietly, "This is acknowledgement. He has seen you." Rylan nodded. He was not sure what the correct response was. He hoped a nod was close enough. Coldrath spoke, long, careful. He looked at Rylan the whole time. Orin translated piece by piece. "You will leave our territory. You will not map the ravine or anything you saw in this ground." A pause while Coldrath continued. "Your kind and our kind have an agreement that your kind has broken many times. He does not extend that agreement to you. He makes a separate one." Rylan said, "What are the terms?" Orin translated the answer. "If you are ever within sight of Ember Spire, you will not be harmed. You will be seen and you will be let through. No other human has this. It ends with you. It does not pass to your authority or your government. It is yours because you earned it and for no other reason." Rylan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I accept." Coldrath made a short sound. Orin said it meant the matter was closed. Vinna spoke without turning her head toward Rylan. She spoke in Draconic, not colonial common, and she spoke to Coldrath, not to him, but Orin translated it anyway in a voice slightly lower than before. "She says the human kept the cold from her daughter through the night. She says that is not a small thing. She says she will not say more than that." Rylan nodded once. He understood. Grief was complicated. He had not done it for the thanks, and she did not owe him any. But she had said it to someone who could tell him, and that was its own kind of thing. Orin looked at him one final time. His expression was still between respect and curiosity, but the balance had shifted. He said simply, "You should go now." Rylan picked up his pack. He started toward the ravine wall and the rope he had left hanging from the edge. Behind him, he heard the hatchling move. He did not turn around. He had said goodbye already, he thought, in the way that counted. He started to climb. He was 3/4 of the way up the ravine wall when he heard it. The small questioning sound, low and uncertain, the same one from the night before, the same one she had made again in the gold light of the morning. He had answered it twice without knowing what it meant. He stopped on the rope and looked down. The hatchling was at the bottom of the ravine, neck craned upward, watching him go. Vinna's tail was curled partway around her, not restraining, just present. The hatchling made the sound again, short, clear. Rylan hung on the rope for a moment. Then he answered it, the same way he had both times before, low, even, no particular meaning, just the sound of someone who was still there and still paying attention. He did not know what she was asking. He answered anyway. The hatchling was still for a moment. Then she pressed back against Vinna's side. Rylan climbed the rest of the way up. He pulled himself over the ravine edge and stood on solid ground, and his legs ached and his back ached, and he was very, very tired. The ashfall barrens spread out in front of him, wide and flat and washed clean by the night's rain. The air smelled sharp and damp. In the distance, past the broken rock formations and the shimmer of geothermal vents opening and closing in the morning heat, The Ember Spire Mountains rose dark against the sky. The second sun, Dreen, was fully up. The light was amber and warm, and it hit the side of the mountains and turned them briefly the same color as the hatchling's scales. Ryland stood there for a moment. Then he picked up his gear and walked back to his post. He made a field report that morning that was 3 sentences long. He noted the heat signature had been a natural geothermal event. He noted his scanner had been damaged in the rain. He noted no survey data had been collected from Sector 7 and recommended it be deprioritized in the next quarterly plan. He filed it. He made heated field coffee and sat with it by the post window and looked out at the mountains. He did not feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had not slept and whose boots were still wet and who had a formal reprimand incoming from Drest, which arrived by midday and which he filed without reading beyond the first paragraph. Life in the Barrens went back to what it had been. He ran surveys, he collected data, he filed reports. The weeks moved the way weeks move out on the frontier, slowly and all at once. He did not go near the eastern border marker. He did not go near Sector 7. He kept the foil blanket clipped to the outside of his pack because it had dried stiff and wrong and was no good for survey work anymore, but he did not throw it out. 6 weeks after the night in the ravine, he found something outside his post door. There was no delivery record, nothing on the landing approach sensors, nothing on the perimeter alert. Whatever had left it had come and gone without triggering a single piece of equipment, which should have been impossible and which he noted with the same steady calm he noted most things. It was a scale, single, copper-colored, slightly larger than his palm, shaped like a broad leaf, thick at the base and tapering to a rounded point. It was warm when he picked it up, warmer than the morning air could account for. He held it for a long time. He thought about the night in the ravine. He thought about the rain and the cold and the way she had put her snout against his knee like she had decided, in the simple logic of a frightened creature, that he was the least dangerous thing available. He thought about how that had not been a calculation on his part. He had not thought about what it might mean or what it might one day become. He had just stayed. It was the only thing that had made sense to him at the time, and he still felt the same way about it. He went back inside. He opened his survey log. He navigated to the entry for the night in the ravine, the one he had kept deliberately short and deliberately vague. He added one line at the bottom. Notable findings, evidence of contact, nature positive. He closed the log. He sat at his window with his second cup of coffee and looked out at the Ember Spire Mountains in the amber morning light. Far out over the barrens, too far to be certain, something large and copper-colored turned against the sky in a wide, slow arc and disappeared behind the peaks. He watched the space where it had been for a while. Then he picked up his scanner, pulled on his coat, and went out to do the day's survey. His boots were dry today. The air was warm. The barrens spread out wide and quiet around him, and the mountains stood at the edge of the world the way they always had, dark and still, keeping whatever they kept. He did not map the ravine. He never did. But sometimes, in the grey window between one sunrise and the next, when the light was still silver and the barrens were quiet, he thought he could hear something low and distant moving over the rock formations to the east. Not a threat, not a warning. Just something making sure he was still there. He always answered.